Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 3 articles in this episode, and all 3 of the URLs are in the description of this video for your convenience, in case you want to do some more research on them. First one is off of BizPac Review. DH Secretary Kelly details sweeping new guidelines to aggressively detain and deport illegals. The Trump administration crackdown on illegal immigration continues in earnest. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly on Saturday gave federal authorities more power to aggressively detain and deport illegal immigrants. Reported by Kelly will also provide more manpower to make it happen. And there's a tweet from the Washington Post that says, memos signed by DHS Secretary describe sweeping new guidelines for deporting illegal immigrants. More from the Post says, Homeland Security Secretary John F. Kelly has signed sweeping new guidelines that empower federal authorities to more aggressively detain and deport illegal immigrants inside the United States and at the border. In a pair of memos, Kelly offered more details on plans for the agency to hire thousands of additional enforcement agents, expand the pool of immigrants who are prioritized for removal, speed up deportation hearings, local law enforcement to help make arrests. Kelly explained in the guidelines that his new order supersedes former President Barack Obama's exclusive focus on hardened criminals with terrorist ties, the newspaper reported. The surge of immigration border has overwhelmed federal agencies and resources and has created a significant national security vulnerability to the United States, Kelly said, citing the 10,000 to 15,000 apprehensions per month at the southern U.S. border between 2015 and 2016. The memos are under review by the White House counsel's office, according to a White House official speaking on the condition of anonymity. The next article that I have for you is off of conservativepost.com, and it says, martial law in France as Paris burns on day 8 of Muslim uprising. 50% of French army deployed to the streets. Wake up, America. Wake up, Europe. This is the plan for the rest of the West. Breitbart says, since the Islamist terror attacks in Paris last November, the streets of major French cities have been guarded by soldiers in full military fatigues. That permanent presence of the French army represents half of all its soldiers now deployed on military operations, but has been dismissed by critics as a political anti-anxiety measure. Following the killing of 132 people in coordinated Islamist terrorist attacks in Paris and its northern suburb, Saint Denis, last November, President Francois Hollande declared the attacks on France an act of war. In response to the French army was sent to the streets of the main cities to offer people a sense of security, beefing up operations already begun following the Charlie Hebdo office and hypercatcher supermarket attacks earlier in 2015. Representing France's first wide-scale peacetime military operation on the mainland, Operation Sentinel deploys fully armed and ununiformed combat troops to patrol public areas and protect key sites such as synagogues, art galleries, nursery schools, metro stations, and mosques. With 10,000 troops across the nation, about 6,500 of which are in the Paris area, The Guardian reports that scale of Operation Sentinel is so huge it represents the single biggest military operation in volume of any such French operation anywhere in the world. And there's some video in this if you want to pull it up to see that. The article continues, representing a fundamental change to how France polices itself and how the army is used. Of all the French soldiers now on active military operations, half of them are deployed patrolling streets at home, protecting them from further Islamist terrorist attacks. The deployment is not uncontroversial, with critics on both the left and the right taking shots at the operation, which is said to cost 1 million euros a day. Center Right Senator Jean-Pierre Raffarin warned that the soldiers' elite training and skills are not fully used. Other critics say that they lose valuable training time. Pay and living conditions have also been criticized, although both have since been addressed to some extent. Even some military voices have privately expressed skepticism regarding how effectively the soldiers actually prevent terrorists from attacking. One general compared it to the Second World War's notorious Maginot Line, the line of concrete fortification obstacles and weapons installations installed on the French side of the borders with Switzerland, Germany, and Luxembourg during the 1930s, which the Germans avoided by invading via the Low Countries to the north of it. The general highlighted how the presence of soldiers guarding key sites followed the attacks of January 2015 did not stop the November attacks on bars, restaurants, and the Bataclan concert hall, which were not on the special protection list. Perhaps in response to such criticism, the operation has recently been adapted to make patrols less static, moving soldiers in a less predictable way to cover wider areas. Former Director France's War College General Vincent Desportes, now a professor at Sciences Po, has warned that the Army was over deployed even before Operation Sentinel was put in place. He believes that not only is the operation's chief role a political anti-anxiety measure, but that it actively weakens the Army, as high demands it faces means soldiers are not having rest time and are losing the collective training and savoir-faire. On the other hand, the spokesman for Operation Sentinel in the Paris region, Colonel Benoit Brulin, said it offers more than just a psychological boost, explaining it's an operation like all the anti-terrorism measures, a combat measure. We're engaging in a conflict, a war in which we fight against terrorists. We are not just here to be visible, even if that visibility helps the resilience of the nation. And the final article I have for you, American Thinker. I had to get a chuckle out of this. I thought you guys would enjoy it. It says, many less than delectable looking bare bottoms were aimed at the Trump Towers in recent days. In the White House briefing room, the media tried to follow suit and got a lesson in how Trump, for a full week, the press stories, funny how they all seem alike, charged that the White House was a scene of turmoil and chaos. Once again, they prematurely pronounced Trump dead. Rasmussen told another story altogether. Voters indicated by 45% that we were heading in the right direction, a higher level of optimism than found during any week of the Obama presidency. He had a higher approval rate than Obama had for his entire second term, and most, save for the few first months of his honeymoon period, 10 days of his term, when apparently under the cover he was planning IEDs for his successor. One Wednesday tracking poll showed 53% of likely voters approve of his performance. The press conference, his ratings soar higher. Its daily presidential tracking poll for Friday shows that 55% of likely U.S. voters approve of President Trump's job performance and should improve. He's made remarkable progress in his first month of office. At the New York Sun, Conrad Black details how much Trump has already accomplished and looks ahead to what will come next. The president is running well ahead of the Democrats in the polls. Approval rating of the Congress, which has risen since the end of gridlock, and 3 times the approval rating of the media. If he can produce a tax system that enriches the lower income families while spurring business, he can generate between 3% and 4% economic growth, which would itself reduce the deficit by $400 to $500 billion a year. the Obama war on business and Hillary Clinton's ambition to flatline the economy by making the voting majority of Americans members of some category of benefit recipient would go with it. The accomplishment if Donald Trump can bring the country back from President Obama's plan to spread the wealth around by increasing the size of the public sector and forcing more people into forms of welfare and refocus it on the entitlement of people incomes as surely as they are entitled to enjoyment of their property, tempered only by the need to provide what the government must have to function, as opposed to buying votes with public money and inciting class warfare. Time, or right on the heels of it, health care plan that is universal but credits for those with adequate incomes and assistance for those who do not. 20 years of stagnant, mainly gridlock government. He will also copt the entire center of the political ground. At the same time, he will have assisted the moderate Democrats to regain control of their party and make it again the centrist Reform Party capable of governing without reducing the country to shambles, as it did under LBJ, President Carter. At that point, the popularity of the administration will cow even the more overwrought sectors of the media. The confected hysteria is subsiding, and Democrats must now face the fact that many of their cherished mistaken policies are about to be torched and the ashes dispersed over the country. Hardly a partisan Republican, Glenn Greenwald notes that the rout of the Democrats is far more than skin deep. The party has collapsed as a national political force, Greenwald said, adding that in addition to losing control of Congress and the White House, they are one legislature away from allowing Republicans to hold unilateral constitutional conventions, which require support of 2/3 of the 50 legislatures. Democrats are so obsessed with calling Trump names, Greenwald said, that they have failed to hold autopsies of their own electoral losses, as Republicans did in 2012 after former Governor Mitt Romney, Republican of Massachusetts, lost to Obama. As if to underscore his point this week, Republican candidate for the Minnesota House, Ann New, trounced her opponent despite a concerted effort by the Democrats. Donald Trump narrowly lost to Hillary Clinton in the contest at the top of the ticket in Minnesota this year, but in other respects, Republicans had an astonishingly good year. They amplified their majority in the Minnesota House to an unprecedented number in the presidential election cycle, when the turnout advantage usually accrues to Democrats, and took the majority in the Minnesota Senate. Republicans haven't held a majority in the Senate in a long time. As the Star Tribune legislative reporter Patrick Cooligan puts it, Senate Republicans have endured the indignities of minority status for all but 2 of the past 44 years. Of course, the forced withdrawal of the president's choice for labor secretary gets more coverage than the Democrats' losses across the board. At history shows there's nothing unusual about losing a cabinet member or so. Fox News research retweeted special report team Obama 3, George W. Bush 2, Clinton 5, Reagan 1. As to public sentiment about deporting criminal illegal aliens, an effort now ongoing, and threats to cut off funds to sanctuary cities, despite all the tales of woe on your front pages, seem to have substantial public support, even among Hispanic voters, whom the Democratic Party has or was surely counting on to oppose them. Trump voters approved 93% to 4%, but Clinton voters also approved 53% to 35%. Near unanimous support, 92% to 6%. Independents, 66% to 18%. And Democrats approved 50% to 37%. The majority of Hispanic voters also approved the deportation of criminal illegal immigrants, 56% to 31%. The numbers might even be better for Trump since more weight was given in the polls to Democrats, 33% Republican. On cutting off federal grants to sanctuary cities, 46% of Hispanic voters agreed, 43% opposed. Overall, the margin was 59% support to 29% opposed. And speaking of the front page stories designed to tug at your heartstrings and make you ignore facts, recall all those stories CNN, Rutgers, New York Times of the innocent dreamer caught up in the sweeps. Turns out he was a gangbanger. Don't bother to waste time looking for updates. Just pay for par for the course of fake and distorted news, as this compendium by the Washington Examiner demonstrates, and you can click on a link to check that out. The press continues to beat the drum about Trump and the Russians, despite the FBI stating that General Mike Flynn committed no crime in his in his discussions with the Russian official. And the innuendo that Trump has some personal as opposed to national interest in trying to develop better ties with Putin is ludicrous. As David Goldman notes in a Facebook comment, says the left-wing mantra about Trump and Putin is lunatic on the face of it. Russia's main ally of convenience is the Middle East, is Iran, which is doing Russia's dirty work on the grounds in Syria and getting top-of-the-line Russian air defense systems. Who empowered Iran? Who took down the sanctions that allow Russia to sell high-tech weapons to Iran? Not Trump. Who's threatening to put Iran on the spot? Not Obama. We're in the Red Queen's court. And confidential information continues, and I have no doubt that those involved will rue the sabotage. It shouldn't be hard to find them. As Charles Martin says, so now, like Colonel Mustard with the lead pipe in the library, pieces have come together. This has to have been authorized under the Obama administration by some pretty high up, or else they wouldn't have access to compartmented information, and leaked by someone pretty high up also, all certainly either a civil service permanent employee held over from the Obama administration or a potential or political appointee very high in the intelligence community. One who was pretty confident they also have friends in high places. Why? It seems it must have been to make trouble for the incoming Trump administration. This is going to get a lot more interesting. Years fussing about presidential press conferences where fangirls of the press lay roses at the feet of Democrats and fling poo and gotchas at Republicans. This week we had a welcome turnabout where the president fully exposed the press perfidy and bias. If you missed it, pour yourself a glass of something you like, put your feet up, and read the transcript. Watch the video. You got links for them here at the bottom of this URL. Your day's come. The press has just mooned the wrong president. And that's all I have for you in this episode. If you like what I'm doing, give it a thumbs up and share it on your social media so everybody can hear the news. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that. I'll see you in the next episode.